You ever feel like something's off about someone, but you just can't put your finger on it? That subtle tension in your gut. That shift in energy when they walk into the room. You're not imagining it. Bad people don't always come with warning labels. They come wrapped in charm, excuses, and just enough confusion to make you doubt your own clarity. Today we're going to expose the signs, not to shame, but to protect, because when you can spot the behavior, you can stop the damage. Let's get into the real truth about the people draining your peace. You ever meet someone who never tells you the whole truth, just enough to keep you around? They'll leave out the part that matters, shift the blame slightly, or twist what really happened, just to shape the story in their favor. It's not a blatant lie, no, it's slicker than that. It's a half-truth, a crafted sentence, a rehearsed version of reality designed to keep you confused, questioning, and most of all, controlled. That's how bad people operate. They twist the truth to control the narrative. See, when they sense that truth might expose their real motives, they distort it. Because the truth has a way of bringing light, and bad people, they don't survive in the light. They operate in shadows, in gray areas, in the maybe and the not sure. They thrive in your uncertainty, because as long as you're unsure, they stay in control. They'll do things like downplay what they said. You're overreacting, they'll tell you, or that's not what I meant. But when you look closer, it's exactly what they meant. They just don't want to admit it, because admitting it means taking responsibility, and bad people don't like responsibility. They like leverage, they like power, they like confusion, because it weakens your ability to respond clearly. Let me give it to you straight. When someone constantly changes their version of events, or tells you one thing and then denies it later, that's not forgetfulness. That's manipulation, that's control, that's their way of shifting your reality so that you start to feel like the unstable one. And once you feel unstable, guess who becomes your anchor? Them. They'll say something that cuts you deep, maybe in a moment of anger, maybe with a smile, but then they'll rewrite the moment later. I didn't say it like that. You're being sensitive. You always twist things, but what's really happening? They are the ones twisting things. They're just projecting that onto you so you second guess your own memory, your own judgment, your own truth. That's gaslighting, and it's one of the most subtle, corrosive forms of manipulation that exists. It doesn't leave a bruise you can see. It doesn't yell, it whispers, it questions, it reshapes, and over time, it breaks people down from the inside out. Here's what's even more dangerous. Bad people are really good at sounding reasonable while doing it. They won't always come at you with rage or aggression. Sometimes it's calm, cool, polite even. That fake maturity they put on is just another mask, another layer between them and accountability. They'll say things like, "Let's not argue," right after saying something deeply disrespectful. They'll talk in circles until you get tired, frustrated, and just give in. And the moment they see that it's working, that is when they double down. You start to hesitate before bringing up things that bother you. You question if you're being too emotional. You tell yourself, maybe I did misunderstand. That self-doubt? It didn't come from nowhere. It was planted, watered, nurtured by someone who didn't want to be seen clearly. The scariest part. You start editing yourself just to avoid conflict. You stop speaking up. You avoid certain topics. You stay quiet not because you agree, but because peace has started to feel more important than truth. That's when you know the narrative has been hijacked, not just the story of what happened, but the story of you. And that's what they want. They want to be the narrator. They want to frame the scene. They want to be the victim in their story, the hero in yours, and the villain in none. But eventually, if you don't wake up, you'll find yourself living in a version of reality where their needs are always centered, and your truth is always up for debate. So how do you break that? You stop letting them rewrite your memory. You start trusting your gut. You stop explaining what they already know they did. You stop needing them to agree with your experience in order for it to be real. Because here's the truth. People who twist reality will never validate yours. People who manipulate facts will never honor your feelings. People who lie with a smile will never care about the scars they leave behind. You don't need a screaming red flag to walk away. Sometimes it's the quiet erosion of your confidence, the subtle shift in your peace, the way your voice trembles now when it used to stand strong. That's not drama, that's damage, and it's not your job to fix someone who broke you while blaming you for bleeding. Truth doesn't have to shout to be heard, it just needs a place to stand, and once you see how someone manipulates it, you don't have to stay in that story anymore. You just have to be bold enough to write a new one. You ever notice how some people always seem to show up when it benefits them, but they vanish when the tables turn? They're right there when they need a favor, when they need your time, your energy, your help, but when you're the one in need, suddenly they're too busy, too distracted, or just flat out gone. That's not just bad timing, that's a pattern, and it tells you everything you need to know, because bad people take. That's what they do, they take your presence, your patience, your support, and they rarely, if ever, give it back. And the worst part, they'll take with a smile, like it's love, like it's connection, but the moment you stop giving, you'll see what the relationship was really built on. You carrying the weight, they'll drain your energy like it's endless, they'll talk about their problems for hours, unload their chaos into your life, expect you to drop everything when they're struggling, but when it's your turn. Silenced, ghosted, dismissed, they'll say things like you're strong, you can handle it, or I didn't know it was that serious, or even worse, why didn't you just say something? As if you hadn't already been screaming silently for weeks. It's not that they don't hear you. It's that your pain doesn't serve them, your needs don't benefit them, your breakdown doesn't feed their ego, so it gets ignored. And here's the catch, they're not always obvious about it. Some of the worst takers are the ones who pretend to care. They'll sprinkle in just enough kindness to keep you hopeful, they'll say the right words, but never follow through with action. They'll promise support, but when life actually gets hard, they disappear behind excuses and justifications, and you're left wondering if you're asking for too much, when really you're asking for the bare minimum. These people are emotional consumers, they feed off your loyalty, your effort, your compassion, and the more you give, the more they expect. It's like a bottomless pit, no amount of love or support ever seems to be enough, because they're not there to build something mutual. They're there to receive, to absorb, to take, and you become the unpaid therapist, the constant cheerleader. The fixer, the one who bends, accommodates, adjusts, just to keep the peace, just to feel needed, just to hold on to something that never really held you back. Let me say this clearly, love is not one-sided, and relationships, whether friendships, family, or romantic, require reciprocity, not perfectly 50/50 every day. Life doesn't work like that, but if someone only shows up when it serves them, if someone consistently drains you and never refills, that's not a connection. That's a transaction, and you're not a product. The truth is, bad people will take your kindness and turn it into a contract. One you never agreed to, one where you always give and they always receive, and the moment you stop, the moment you start setting boundaries, they'll accuse you of being cold, distant, selfish. Not because you actually are, but because you've disrupted their access. But real love, real friendship, wants to give back. It notices when you're tired. It sees when you're holding too much, it steps in without being asked, and bad people, they don't step in. They stand back, they watch you struggle, and sometimes they even enjoy it, because your exhaustion validates their selfishness. Your silence protects their comfort. You keep thinking if you give more, they'll finally see your worth. But bad people already see your worth, that's why they're taking. They just never plan to give anything of value in return, and the longer you stay in that dynamic, the more depleted you become. Until one day, you wake up and realize you're the only one holding the relationship together, and you have been for a long time. So what do? You stop overgiving to people who underappreciate. You stop sacrificing your emotional health just to keep someone in your life who wouldn't even notice if you were gone. You stop being afraid of losing people who never truly saw you in the first place, and more importantly, you start watching behavior, not words. Because bad people will say they care, they'll say they value you, they'll say all the right things. But love isn't proven through promises, it's proven through presence, through action, through showing up, even when it's inconvenient. It's not selfish to expect effort, it's not toxic to want support. And it's not too much to ask for a relationship where you're not constantly running on empty just to keep someone else full. Because here's the truth, if someone only loves the version of you that gives, but disappears when you need to receive, that's not love. That's use, and you deserve better than being someone's emotional vending machine. Some people walk into a room and light it up with their charm. They know how to smile, how to say the right things, how to play the part, and at first glance, they seem like everything you'd want in a friend, a partner, a mentor, someone confident, kind, magnetic even. But what you don't realize right away is that the version of them you're seeing, it's a mask, a carefully curated image, polished for public view. And it hides something much darker underneath. Bad people are masters of duality. They know how to be admired by everyone except the people closest to them. And that's not by accident, that's by design. They've studied how to win people over. They've rehearsed the lines, the jokes, the mannerisms. In public, they're generous, humble, maybe even the life of the party. People look at them and think, wow, what a good person. But when the doors close and the crowd fades, that's when the real version shows up, and the switch is shocking. You start noticing things that don't match the image. Behind closed doors, there's criticism instead of encouragement, control instead of care. Coldness where there was once warmth. You feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing, not because they'll explode, but because they'll shut down, withdraw, or twist it into something you never meant. And then, just when you're questioning everything, they flip back into their public persona again, smiling, charming, calm, and you're left feeling confused, even guilty, like maybe you're the one overreacting. But you're not. What you're seeing is the truth behind the mask. Bad people use their charm like a shield. As long as they can keep everyone else fooled, they don't have to deal with accountability, and the more liked they are in public, the easier it is for them to discredit anyone who sees the real version. That's why it's so isolating. You try to explain it to others, and they look at you like you're the problem. They would never do that. They say, they're such a great person. And now you're not only dealing with the pain of the experience, you're dealing with the loneliness of not being believed. That loneliness, that's exactly where they want you, because if no one believes you, then they can keep being whoever they need to be, to whoever they need to impress. And you're just the one left cleaning up the emotional mess in silence. They create two realities. The one everyone sees, and the one you live in, and they flip between them so smoothly, so naturally, that you start questioning your own perception. You think, maybe it's me, maybe I'm just sensitive, maybe they're just stressed, maybe I caught them on a bad day. But deep down you know this isn't a one-time thing, it's a pattern, and patterns don't lie. What they say in public doesn't match how they treat you in private, and no matter how hard you try, you can't seem to reconcile the two. You keep hoping the version of them that everyone else sees is the real one. You hold out thinking that maybe, just maybe, that person will show up for you again. And sometimes they do, just long enough to keep you holding on, but it never lasts, because the mask isn't who they are, it's who they pretend to be. And here's what you have to understand, consistency is character. If someone's kindness is conditional, if their respect turns on and off depending on who's watching, then it's not real. It's performance, and you are not obligated to stay in the audience. You don't have to keep explaining or justifying what you feel. You don't need to convince yourself to settle for half-hearted apologies and temporary changes. The truth is, if someone only shows their best self when it benefits them, and hides their worst when you're most vulnerable, that's not a person you can trust. What makes this hard is that the charm is addicting. The good moments are powerful. When they're on, it feels like everything you hoped for. But that's the trick. That's how they keep you stuck. They give you just enough to make you stay, but not enough to make you safe. And over time, that charm turns into a weapon, not a weapon against your body, but against your clarity, against your peace, against your ability to trust your own judgment. And once you lose that, they don't even need to control you anymore. You'll do it yourself, doubting, explaining, minimizing, settling. But here's the truth that sets you free. Who someone pretends to be in public is not more important than who they consistently show up as in private. So stop giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who keeps showing you who they really are when no one else is watching. You ever try to have an honest conversation with someone, just to clear the air, work through something, and by the end, you end up apologizing for something they did? That's not just frustrating, that's not just confusing, that's a tactic. That's what bad people do. They don't take responsibility. They shift it. Every time something goes wrong, it's never their fault. They have an explanation, a backstory, a reason why you misunderstood, why you triggered it, why you made them act that way, and little by little, the conversation drifts away from what they did and starts becoming all about how you responded to it. Now you're defending your tone instead of dealing with the actual issue. Now you're questioning whether you overreacted instead of asking why they crossed the line in the first place. That's how they flip the script, that's how they avoid accountability, and they are masters at it. Bad people live in a cycle of blame. They never stay in the mirror long enough to reflect on their actions because they're too busy finding someone else to point the finger at. It's always their boss, their parents, their past, their stress, their ex. It's always something outside of them that made them behave the way they did. They rarely just say, "That was wrong, I hurt you, I need to fix it." You won't hear that from someone who's more committed to protecting their ego than healing the damage they've caused. And here's where it gets real twisted. They can even fake taking responsibility. You'll hear phrases like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "I guess I could have done better." It sounds like an apology, right? But it's hollow, it's vague, it's not owning anything, there's no accountability in that. That's just a clever way to sound remorseful without actually being remorseful. That's not humility, that's deflection in disguise. And the cost of that, it builds up in you. You keep trying to carry conversations that they keep walking away from emotionally. You keep bringing issues to the table that they keep sweeping under the rug, and after enough of that, you start to shrink. You stop speaking up, you stop trusting your voice, because what's the point? Every time you try, it just gets flipped back on you. Now you're too sensitive, and now you're always complaining, and now you feel guilty for having boundaries. That's the emotional toll of dealing with someone who refuses to take responsibility. It's not just the arguments, it's what those arguments steal from you, your peace, your confidence, your clarity. You start to question everything. You wonder if maybe you're the one who's always overreacting. Maybe your expectations are too high. Maybe it really wasn't a big deal. But deep down your body knows, your spirit knows, the knots in your stomach, the racing thoughts, the restless nights. That's your inner warning system saying, "This isn't right." You're not crazy, you're being blamed for someone else's behavior, and it's exhausting you. You see, people who avoid responsibility are not just protecting themselves, they're controlling you. They're shaping the narrative in a way that keeps you off balance, because as long as you're off balance, you can't stand firm in your truth. And they know that, they count on that, they thrive on that. But here's the truth, maturity isn't measured by how someone behaves when they're calm and things are going well. It's measured by how they respond when they mess up, when they've hurt someone, when they are called out. That's when you see who they really are. Do they listen? Do they reflect? Do they take steps to change? Or do they twist the story, make you the villain, and walk away like they've done nothing wrong? You don't need a perfect person in your life, but you do need someone willing to say, "That was me. I got it wrong, let me make it right." And if they can't do that, if every confrontation turns into a courtroom where you're on trial for their mistakes, you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance. A game where your pain is just another plot point they can spin to their advantage. At some point, you have to stop trying to make peace with someone who only knows how to make excuses. At some point, you have to realize that accountability isn't optional, it's foundational. It's not just about getting closure, it's about building something real. And you can't build anything lasting with someone who breaks things and then blames you for stepping on the glass. The people who grow are the ones who own, the ones who say, "That was me," without needing a paragraph of disclaimers. That's growth, that's integrity, that's healing. But the people who always deflect, always blame, always rewrite the story to paint themselves as the misunderstood hero. Those people aren't looking to grow, they're looking to escape. And the longer you stay in that cycle, the more you end up holding pain that was never yours to carry. You can't heal what someone refuses to admit they broke. Sometimes the most dangerous people don't shout, don't hit, don't scream. They speak softly, they smile when they talk, they call you kind names and give you compliments that seem genuine, but something about them drains you. And you can't figure out why. Their words are sweet, even supportive at times, but when they leave the room, you feel tense. Heavy, a little less confident. That's not by accident. That's their energy speaking louder than their vocabulary. Bad people know how to say all the right things. They use charming language, flattering phrases, even spiritual or motivational talk to make you feel like they're safe, like they're good for you. But their energy tells a different story. You ever have a conversation with someone where, on paper, they didn't say anything wrong, but you walked away feeling small, uneasy, like you needed to apologize or fix something? That's not about what they said, it's about how they said it. It's about the intent underneath their words. That's where the poison hides, not in the words themselves, but in the tone, in the pause, in the subtle facial expression, in the passive-aggressive delivery that feels polite on the surface but stings underneath. They'll say things like, "You're so brave to wear that," or "I would have never guessed you could pull that off," and laugh like it's a joke. But deep down, you feel the jab, and when you bring it up, "Oh, come on, I was just playing." Don't be so sensitive. There it is again, that game, the game of making you question your own instincts. The game of using nice-sounding words to hide their true intentions, because if they said it with a smile, if they worded it carefully, then technically, they didn't do anything wrong, right? Wrong energy doesn't lie. You feel it even when you can't explain it. You pick up on it even when your mind is still catching up. And bad people, especially manipulative ones, count on that delay. They count on your logic overriding your intuition. They count on you brushing off that discomfort because they didn't really mean it like that. But what if they did? What if their words are just a cover? Some people use positivity as a costume. They sound like encouragers, like peacemakers, like mentors, but behind that, they're controlling, condescending, even cruel. You'll hear things like, "I'm just being honest," after they've crushed your spirit. Or "It's for your own good," after they've overstepped a boundary, and they say it with calmness, composure. So you tell yourself, maybe they're right, maybe I needed to hear that, but it doesn't feel like growth, it feels like shame. And that's the giveaway. When someone corrects you from love, even if it's uncomfortable, you feel stronger afterward. You feel supported, more grounded. But when someone corrects you from control, from pride, from their own insecurity, you feel smaller. You feel confused, you feel like shrinking. Bad people don't need to be loud to be dangerous. Their power is in their subtlety. They'll manipulate a conversation so gracefully that you don't even realize what happened until hours later. You'll replay it in your head thinking, "Why did that bother me so much? They didn't even raise their voice, they didn't cuss, they didn't insult me outright." But that's what makes it worse. It's easier to identify abuse when it's loud. It's much harder when it's disguised as care. You might even start to look like the dramatic one, because you're reacting to what people can't hear, but what you felt. And that's why so many people stay silent, because it's hard to explain how words that sounded polite made you feel worthless. It's hard to point to the moment they crossed a line when they were smiling the whole time. But the truth is, manipulation doesn't have to sound harsh. Sometimes it sounds like advice, like concern, like love. And that's what makes it so hard to call out. You're afraid of being seen as ungrateful, as too emotional, as the one who's always making something out of nothing. So you swallow it. You pretend it didn't bother you. You try harder to keep the peace, but the tension builds, the unease grows, because deep down, you know the difference between love and control. You know when someone's pouring into you versus slowly draining the life out of you with a kindness. At some point, you have to stop judging people by their words and start observing how they make you feel. If your energy dips every time they speak, pay attention. If you leave the conversation more insecure than you entered it, pay attention. If you're always doubting your value, your strength, your clarity after dealing with them, pay attention, because someone who truly cares about you won't just speak with kindness, they'll carry kindness in their presence. In their tone, in their silence, in their corrections, you'll feel safe, seen, respected. But if their words sound sweet and their presence feels bitter, trust the feeling. Trust the disconnect. Words can be rehearsed, but energy is always honest. And when someone's energy is poison, it doesn't matter how pretty the glass is, it's still going to make you sick. You ever have someone hurt you, look you straight in the eyes, and say all the right words, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it, I'll change," and in that moment, it feels sincere. You want to believe them. You do believe them, because you're wired for connection, for restoration, for hope. But then the days pass. The weeks go by, and slowly, the same pattern creeps back in, the same comments, the same behaviors, the same emotional bruises. And before you know it, you're standing in the same place, hearing the same apology from someone who never really meant to change, just to reset the cycle. Bad people repeat harmful patterns and cover them up with apologies that are empty of action. They know how to sound convincing. They know the script. They know exactly what to say to get you to lower your guard, to stop the confrontation, to start second-guessing yourself. And sometimes that apology doesn't come from guilt. It comes from fear, fear of consequences, fear of exposure, fear of losing access to you. But not fear of hurting you again, because if they were really afraid of doing that, the behavior would stop. An apology without change is just another manipulation tool, and people who consistently hurt you, say sorry, and then turn around and do it again aren't remorseful. They're just strategic. They don't want to be held accountable. They want to hit pause, not stop. They want a reset button, not a transformation. And they count on your compassion. They count on the fact that you're empathetic, that you see the best in people, that you don't give up easily. So they lean into that, using your softness as a shield from their own consequences. They'll say things like, "I didn't mean it," or "it won't happen again," or "you know I'm working on myself." But growth isn't about words, it's about consistency. You don't measure someone's sincerity by how well they speak under pressure. You measure it by what they do when no one's watching, when they're not being called out, when you're not pleading for respect. That's when you find out if someone really meant what they said. But people who are stuck in cycles of harm rarely take those quiet moments to grow. They use them to prepare their next excuse, their next justification, their next "I'm just going through a lot right now." And it wears you down, because every time you take their apology and hope it's different this time, you open yourself up again. You give them access again, and each time they repeat the same behavior, it cuts a little deeper, because now it's not just about what they did. It's about the fact that they knew how it made you feel, and did it anyway. That's the betrayal. Not just the action, but the knowledge. They knew, they saw, they promised, and they broke that promise. And here's what makes it even harder. Sometimes, in between the apologies and the mistakes, there are good moments. There's laughter, affection, familiarity, and you start to wonder, can someone really be bad if we have moments like this? But good moments don't erase harmful patterns. Being nice sometimes doesn't heal the pain caused repeatedly. We've got to stop confusing temporary kindness with lasting change. Because people can be kind and still be harmful. They can cry in front of you and still go right back to disrespecting you. Tears don't equal transformation. Emotions don't equal growth. True change is quiet, it's proven. It shows up in the day-to-day choices, in the way they start holding themselves accountable before you have to bring it up. And if you find yourself constantly forgiving the same behavior, constantly waiting for them to finally get it, constantly hoping this time is the time, you're not in a relationship anymore. You're in a loop, and the only way to break a loop is to stop dancing in the same circle, hoping the music will change. It's not your job to keep giving someone opportunities to grow if they're not using them. You're not the rehab center for their lack of self-control. You're not the proof they need that they're worthy. You're not the reason they'll finally be better. You can have empathy and boundaries. You can believe in someone's potential and still walk away from their pattern, because belief in who someone could be does not excuse who they keep choosing to be. Eventually, you have to realize that repeated apologies without change are just emotionally wrapped lies. They're not signs of growth, they're signs of delay. They're not for healing, they're for buying time, and while they're buying time, you're spending peace, you're spending energy. You're spending your sense of self trying to survive a relationship that keeps wounding you and calling it love. So when someone says sorry, look beyond the words, watch what happens next, because change doesn't come in the promise, it shows up in the pattern. Stop waiting for their words to mean something, start watching their actions. If the pattern doesn't change, you must protect your peace, honor your truth, and if you need permission to walk away, this is it.